Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Dan.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is David Labb.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick
I'm
Gillette.
Christopher
This is
Knopf.
Dr. Bob Greenberg.
I'm Laird Hamilton.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, I'm Mark Valley.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
And we have a special guest judge with us tonight, the one and only Mike Lipari.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero, Mark Valley, and Pete A. Turner.
Mike had the fucking bright idea to do the Battle Royal of all Battle Royals. Tonight's album fight is
The Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band takes on the Beach Boys, Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
The two seminal 60s albums that are on everybody's top 10 lists forever.
Well, not just on everybody's top 10 list, it's Rolling Stone's top 500 albums of all time, 1 and 2.
Yep.
That's significant.
Yep, it is significant. We're talking about the 11th studio album by the Beach Boys. The 11th studio album by the Beach Boys. What many consider their most adventurous work is Pet Sounds. It featured lush vocal harmonies, but was a departure from all their previous albums in that they thematically left the beach for more sophisticated sounds, arrangements, and subject matter. The album has been preserved in the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress for its cultural significance. Like you guys mentioned, number 2 in the Rolling Stone 500 Greatest Albums of All Time, which, by the way, they revised, I think in 2003 or whatever. The first list came out 2003, and the second list came out in
2012.
2012, right. And in the revision, still number 2. According to Paul McCartney, its musical experimentation inspired Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which was their 8th studio album. It's also been preserved in the National Recording Registry for its cultural significance, and it has sold well over 32 million copies. We've got a battle. Hey, let's get some pre-fight analysis from our old buddy Richard Lackey. Richard, take it away.
Good evening, gentlemen. Here we are. As we've said on social media, this one was inevitable. It's the two critical darlings, the number 1 and number 2. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band versus Pet Sounds. There isn't a word like Titanic or Colossal that can fit how big this fight is. But let's start off with one simple fact, and that is Pet Sounds came first. It came out in May of 66. Sgt. Pepper's came out a year later in May of 67. So there's an interesting fact. Pet Sounds was not commercially or even critically that successful in the beginning. And for a little bit of perspective, Beatles producer George Martin said, without Pet Sounds, Sgt. Pepper would never have happened. Paul McCartney even said, it's very cleverly done, so we were inspired by it and nicked a few ideas. There are also parallels between these two albums. One is the lack of touring. Brian Wilson decided in about 64 he had kind of a mental breakdown, so he basically asked the band if he could just stay at home and write songs and go into the recording studio and they could go tour the albums. Also, this album is singularly one of the members' brainchild, and that's Wilson. Plus getting lyrical help from a friend he made in Tony Asher, just some advertising guy that he'd just had a chance encounter with at Capitol Records. Instruments on the album varied from theremin, orchestral instruments, Hawaiian strings, harpsichord, even Coca-Cola cans were used. The album gets its title, and here's a misconception. It has nothing to do with animals. It was a response to the fact that the music and the sounds on the album were Brian Wilson's pet or favorite sounds. And when in discussions with the band, they went over a bunch of names, some of which the record company didn't like. One of the band members just said, hey, these are your pet sounds. And that's where Pet Sounds comes from. To a lot of people, it's generally considered a Brian Wilson solo album. It also led to some dissension in the band. And like Sgt. Pepper came out of the ideas that were previously kind of laid down in Revolver and Rubber Soul, Pet Sounds is the extension of the previous album Today. This is also considered an early concept album and helped propel rock music from just dance music, which it was considered back then. So let that sink in for a second. Rock was just considered something you danced to before these albums, which brings us to Sgt. Pepper's. It was a huge commercial and critical success right off the bat. 15 weeks at number 1 in the U.S., I think 27 in the UK. It won 4 Grammys, including Album of the Year, and this was the first rock album to ever do that. It was also the first album to print the lyrics on the record sleeve. They'd never been done before. Much like the Beach Boys, in '66, the entire band, the Beatles, decided they were going to retire from performing live. So with that in mind, not having to worry about playing the songs live gave them freedom and no limitations in creating the sounds for the album. As we talk about the Beatles and praise the Beatles, let's not forget producer George Martin's influence and skills. They're vital here, as is engineer Jeff Emmerich. This album combines early 1900s marching bands with circus music, with traditional music from India, with rock and roll. This was surprisingly all Paul McCartney's idea. He had it when he was coming back from Kenya on a flight. It's said that it was inspired by Freak Out by Frank Zappa's Mothers of Invention, which is considered the very first concept album. This was all McCartney's baby, so the other band members began kind of resenting the music. Harrison and Starr both felt it kind of boring. Ringo even went so far as to say the only thing he really remembers from recording the album was learning to play chess, so that says something. They used a variety of new techniques that have never been done before in rock music, some of which they pretty much just invented on the spot. But this album wasn't really the first of its kind. The Beatles had been evolving to this. You could be heard in Rubber Soul and Revolver, like I said, and in Pet Sounds, which was a year older, and in Mother's Invention Freak Out. So it's not that this was solely unique. These sounds had been played with by other people, or these ideas had been played with by other people, but this was the big one. This was the one that told the world, this is what rock and roll can be. Even more of an influence on these albums was just the drastic change in culture in general. This was the transition from post-World War II world into what most of us considered kind of modern times. And some more perspective. Let's talk about influence. Paul McCartney said God Only Knows is his favorite song of all time. Pet Sounds was inspired after Brian Wilson heard Rubber Soul. Sgt. Pepper's had an immediate reaction response from the Beatles' contemporaries. Jefferson Airplane, the Rolling Stones, and King Crimson all put out albums in the vein of Sgt. Pepper's as a reaction. Then later down the line, bands like Genesis, Yes, Rush, and Jethro Tull were all influenced by the Beatles and Sgt. Pepper's. Rock operas like The Who's Tommy and Andrew Lloyd Webber's Jesus Christ Superstar all share influence from Sgt. Pepper. Albums influenced by Pet Sounds include Wilco's Summer Teeth, Fleet Fox's self-titled debut, which I love, the album Pinkerton by Weezer, Nick Drake's Pink Moon, David Bowie's Hunky Dory, Elliott Smith's XO. All these albums have that DNA of Pet Sounds in them. Bands influenced by both of these albums include XTC, Radiohead, The Flaming Lips, Tears for Fears, the DBs, their contemporaries like the Stones, The Who, Mothers of Invention, Jefferson Airplane, and pretty much any band that uses strong, complex harmonies, orchestral instruments, odd and complicated arrangements, or arranging songs by theme or concept. It all started with these two albums. These two albums can be divisive with some people. Some people love one and hate the other. Some people hate them both as pretentious and overly bloated, even too weird. Some people just react to be the contrarian. Oh, you say it's great, so I'm going to hate it just to prove that I'm not some kind of a sheep. That's fine. Personal taste or stubbornness will always be a part of this. All I ask is to, at the very least, give them a listen and take them in for what they are. Look at them through the lens of historical perspective. The Beach Boys were pretty much just guys who sang about surfing and cars. Literally, that's about all they sang about. And then they put Pet Sounds out. The Beatles just kind of wanted to hold your hand. That was music then. Vanilla, poppy, made for mass consumption, and very formulaic. You may not agree these are the greatest two albums of all time. You'd be wrong, but that's okay. But you have to at least understand then that they are the two most important albums of all time. This is a close one, guys. I'm going to give Beatles 7 rounds, Beach Boys 6 rounds. This is a great one. Back to you guys.
All right. Thanks, Richard. What do you say, Pete?
For me, I think I'm curious to see. Obviously, there's your two juggernaut bands. Brian Wilson, like you said, he inspires the Beatles to reach for more, and that inspiration just bled out into everything everybody did after that. I'm very curious to see how having the Wrecking Crew support the band, the Beach Boys, is going to have an impact, and then how does the sheer genius of George Martin come through in the production? What we're not going to see is the production value from Axis Boldest Love. These are two albums produced with bands that are established, have the money and the time. And Brian Wilson saying, I'm going to make the best rock and roll album ever. Okay. I think we're going to see a long, hard, grisly fight.
Yeah, it's a hardy goal.
If you look at Sgt. Pepper, it was really a progression from Rubber Soul, which was a bit more experimental, not quite as pop soundy, and then into Sgt. Pepper's, which was just another stratosphere. But you also look at the Beach Boys and the beach sound and Surfer Girl, Surfing USA, etc. Compare that to Pet Sounds. Again, it's a departure from anything they've done before. There's a reason why these are seminal 60s albums.
Yeah.
Because they did something both bands hadn't done before.
Yep. Well, let's go for it. Round one is Wouldn't It Be Nice versus Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Mike, our guest, goes first.
Thanks. Round one was super tough. Both bands come out of the gate really swinging. I'll start with Sgt. Pepper's. And again, these are two iconic songs from two iconic albums. This was maybe one of the hardest rounds I had to do. Sgt. Pepper's really comes in with a tight arrangement and a lot of energy right out of the gate. And I've always loved this song because of that. I mean, it really just grabs you, right? The Beach Boys don't have as strong the musical performance coming out. It's a lot more light and airy, but it's definitely a departure from what they've done in the past. Vocally, Wouldn't It Be Nice really, I think, takes the round because there are well-rehearsed harmonies and a deeper, meaningful set of lyrics. It kind of overpowers lyrically what Sgt. Pepper's is doing. It's one of those pop songs that dares to talk about how nice it would be to grow old together. Not something you're going to hear on a rock and roll album very often. You listen to McCartney's voice, that near scream of an intro, just, again, it tells you that the Beatles are here to do business. If I could give both bands a knockdown, I would, because they really just punch each other and pummel each other. It really feels like both of the bands are here to do damage. But in the end, I give this one to the Beach Boys. They squeak by in a 10-9 victory.
Wow.
I just think that Wouldn't It Be Nice is just a slightly better song when just put against Sgt. Pepper head to head. And this was really hard for me to do. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is one of my absolute favorite albums, one of the first ones I ever got on vinyl. It was painful to write the score down, but in the end, I have to go with where my brain tells me, which is slight edge to the Beach Boys. 10-9.
Pete.
Sgt. Pepper's and the Beach Boys, like you said, Mike, they come out and they're swinging hard. And one thing that we're going to learn is that these bands are not afraid to grab that other instrument back on the back wall that's got dust on it, knock the dust off and get after it. Horns lead the way, laughing. The lyrics are strong. McCartney, I read this note, McCartney sure can sing. And then I wrote, am I really going to say that out loud?
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
Yeah, it's not the strongest start, though, among our album fights. And that's the thing that I took away from it. Is this is a short song, and we've had other beginnings of albums where they knock the door down and say, here we go. This isn't that kind of album. And so for that, I'm like, just a shade below the brilliance that we've seen in other fights. So there's no real weakness in this thing. It's just other songs have started albums better. Wouldn't it be nice? I wrote down this lyric, and I didn't write down a whole bunch of the lyrics because there's so many great ones, but when we can say goodnight and stay together, that's beautiful. I mean, that's...
Oh, grow a pair.
I know. I know. But I love it. I love what that represents and the happiness therein, and there's plenty of time. And, this album's about life, so there's plenty of time for self-reflection and not getting it right. But this is a great tune. We're off to a great start. The only thing I'm worried about the Beatles again is the Wrecking Crew and what they're going to deliver throughout this album, because they're always the best musicians in the room. So in this one, I'm going to agree with Mike, and I'm going to go 10-9 Beach Boys.
Oh, Jesus. Well, Wouldn't It Be Nice is one of my favorite songs of all time. Okay, it speaks of youthful optimism and the joy of everlasting love. Now, Brian Wilson had just turned 24 when he started recording. This is their fucking 11th album. He had just turned 24. Yeah. Just turned 24, too. So he had already retired from touring because he had that nervous breakdown on the plane or something. And this song was reflective and mature beyond its years. Sgt. Pepper's is a great song, like you guys said. It had a French horn in it, like Pete said. Dust off that fucking French horn. Bring it over here. Ultimately, though, it's just the intro to the album. It's an intro song. And so I went, Wouldn't It Be Nice, 10-9. Round 2, You Still Believe in Me versus With a Little Help from My Friends. Take it away, Pete.
This is another huge thing, but I'm going to start off with the Beach Boys because that's how I do this. I go rotate who starts the round for me. But the harmonies with the plucked piano chords in sync, that is a career-defining decision when they get that crazy sound that they got out of the piano. I guess Brian Wilson held down the notes that he wanted to play, and then someone came along and strummed that with different metal things, whether it was a paper clip or something else. And then they sang to those notes, and it just created this real ethereal, magical sound that sort of permeates the rest of the album. Wilson goes for something big, and the innovations and experiments going on. Again, this is so much better in terms of experiment and landing it than we saw in Axis Bold as Love. He's taking real chances. He's going out there. Tony Asher's a great partner. Every time, that those guys write a song, it gets there. There's a bicycle horn played by Hal Blaine, and it's purposeful. It makes sense, the bicycle bell on the horn, because there is a hearkening back to youth and everything in this song. So I love it. I go 10-9 in this, and that doesn't take anything away from With a Little Help from My Friends, because it is a fantastic song. It's just, this is Ringo's song, and they put it in a key that Ringo can handle. And when you're at the greatest album of all time level, you get to have your buddy Ringo sing, and there's nothing wrong with this song. It's just the other one has more in it, and there's just more capability displayed in this one particular case. I love what's going on in both songs, but this is a very tight 10-9 for me.
All right, You Still Believe in Me is too sparse. That's how I felt. The nice texture and the harmonies, beautiful. You're right. Those harmonies are absolutely well developed. But that plucking sound was too much like a harpsichord for me, and that's not my favorite for this arrangement. I salute the experimentation. I just don't think it's aged well. I wish he would have used something warmer, like a vibraphone. A Little Help from My Friends is a Ringo song, and I love Ringo. I think it speaks to optimism that I like so much from that time. It was the mid-'60s. They still had segregation. They were leading up to Vietnam, and optimism was in short supply. So I went 10-9 Beatles. Mike?
You Still Believe in Me it's a wonderful song. It really is. And the more times I listened to it, the more it grew on me. I got to admit, I hadn't heard Pet Sounds in a very long time before this album pipe. It was nice to reacquaint myself with these songs, and as I was listening more and more, this song really did start to grow on me. But I had a little trouble with some of the extra sounds that they threw in there. I think that they were probably really cool back in the day, but I don't think the bicycle horn and the bells and all that really aged well. I said the same thing that John did. I think the song has aged well. A Little Help from My Friends has aged extremely well. And yeah, it's written in Ringo's very short range. The man has a range of an air rifle. But he's Ringo. And
yep,
he's heartfelt in his limited range in this song. You can really feel it. And I don't know, I was going to ask John later, probably now, what is your opinion about Ringo as a drummer?
He was important. He was very important to rock drums as an art form. He's a seminal drummer. He didn't have the greatest chops. He wasn't technically all that shit. But he's Ringo Starr. And he was the biggest rock star in the universe. And he showed a generation of people what you were supposed to do with a drum set. And a bunch of chicks. So, we love Ringo around this neighborhood.
I said the drumming was tight in this one.
Mm-hmm.
and that Ringo performed well. And how would you feel being in a band with John Lennon and Paul McCartney?
I feel like getting some chicks.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the leftovers, which are still better than anyone else in any other band.
Yeah,
I love that John and Paul wrote this song for their friend, and then I also love that as they recorded it, they're like, we're going to stay up all night and then surprise you by making you sing it as the last thing you do before we leave. And it's always the last song he plays at his live gigs. So this has always resonated, and this is about friends. I love that part of the song.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going 10-9 Beatles here. Another close round.
Mm-hmm. Round 3. That's Not Me versus Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Okay, I dug the Carol Kay and Tommy Tedesco parts on this record. Again, a little too sparse for me. The experimentation, one more time, it's cool, but damn, this song has just not aged well. I don't know what it is about the fidelity on this album, but it hasn't stood the test of time in that 1 year difference stylistically between, 65 and 66 when these two albums were recorded? It's an enormous difference. This album was remastered not long ago, Pet Sounds, and so was Sgt. Pepper's for the 50th anniversary. And they're worlds apart in fidelity. Look, if Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is about LSD, I want to do some. And it had sparseness in the verses and then came with a beat in the sing-along choruses. So I went 10-9 Beatles. Pete?
Yeah, there's so many things about. So let's just start off with That's Not Me. In our goofy format, this song is just not incredible, and I always put that on the format because it's just something we can't get around. This is a good song, and it's autobiographical, and it comes at a time when Brian Wilson's going to be struggling for the next 10 years just to get out of bed. Boy, that makes this song very important. However, it runs up against one of those songs, and I do think that the Beatles have more of these songs than anybody else. This song exits above the great song, the greatest hits. Like if you can write something higher than a greatest hits album, this is on it. This is more than a pillar. They reach a special place with this song, and I don't care what it's about. It's great. It's a masterwork. The lyric is incredible. It means everything to everyone in a different way, but something different to everybody. And I actually have this as being just an actual powerhouse knockdown round, 10-8 Beatles.
Mike?
So this is Mike Love's first appearance as the lead vocalist. He's in for a tough round for Mike. That Not Me is a good, catchy song. I did like it. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Jesus. It's a generational song. And I found myself really digging into the song just to dissect it and listen to it with new ears. The intro, very sparse, very dreamy, and then you can hear the rhythm section starting to come in. The bass line in Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is way more complex than I remember it being. Way more complex. But I was focusing in on it. I listened to the song all the way through once, just listening to the bass line. I'm like, wow, Paul McCartney's pretty good. And you listen to Ringo's drums, and he's really just pounding the shit out of those things.
Yeah.
In this song, he really is just...
He's not kidding around.
Yeah, he's hitting them hard. Look for the girl with the sun in her eyes. And she's gone. Boom, boom, boom. Great harmony. And the Beatles can harmonize too, Beach Boys.
They can.
They can.
They can.
They can do it really well. I've got the Beach Boys taking a knee too. It's a 10-8.
Wow.
Beatles knock them down.
Wow. I was generous, I guess, huh? Keep it going, Mike. Round 4 is Don't Talk, Put Your Head on My Shoulder versus Getting Better All the Time. What say you?
What I say is this is another close round. I'm going to start with the Beatles this time. Getting Better is a really good Beatles song. A really, really good Beatles song. And this one, again, was when it was growing on me the more I listened to both albums. I think here there's complex harmonies of both songs, but musically the Beatles really stick to what's worked for them in the past. Getting Better is a Beatles song, end to end, definitely a good song. The Beach Boys went way more ethereal and experimental with this, but in this case it worked. It's a love song about not talking, and how many love songs are there about not talking?
How many love songs are there about not talking? That is fucking brilliant.
Not very many.
This is Brian Wilson saying, shh, shut up, bitch. Shut up.
Yeah, just put your head on my shoulder.
Put your head on my fucking shoulder and shut up. I might have scored this round differently had I had that revelation.
And also just Brian Wilson has an amazing falsetto, and that's throughout this album.
That's true.
He's a natural tenor, so he already has a really high singing voice. So the transition from singing chest voice to falsetto head voice isn't jarring at all. He can transition back and forth and does it throughout this song so beautifully. Just the voice is amazing. A great Beatles song gets beat by a great Beach Boys song. Beach Boys take it 10-9.
Pete?
Yeah, I kind of heard the same things as Mike. I'm going to echo what you're saying. The first words I write in my notes are Carol Kay. And one of the things that the Beach Boys get right is they get these time capsule moments. If you make a movie and you want to create a feeling of that era, you're going to pay the Beach Boys the money for their songs. And Carol Kay is that thing. I mean, that she has this knack for finding the sound that Brian Wilson wanted. She does it over and over again in this album, but in particular, they nail it. And like you said, Mike, I said they approached schmaltzy, but stayed on the good side and just not saccharine, just sweet. And those are very fine differences. But I loved what they did. And you're right. He's like, just put your head on my shoulder, listen to my heart. And then there's Carol Kay, ba-boom, 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 on that bass, throwing down the heartbeat, but not nailing it on the nose, just perfect. And I give a lot of credit for that. When it comes to the Beatles, I love like the off-tempo chords in the beginning where they're kind of call and responsey, and that, man, George Harrison is so good. But if this is one of the worst tracks on the album, put it against any other track on any other album, and it's going to win over half the time easily. It's no wonder these albums are 1 and 2 from Rolling Stone, because they're so strong, only because Pet Sounds got there first, and they inspired Paul McCartney and the rest of the guys to create Sgt. Pepper's. Only because of that. This one time, I'm going to give them the first mover advantage, and I'm going to give them this round 10-9 by the smallest of margins.
Jesus Christ, people. I'm a drummer. You got Hal Blaine on this record. He played the theme from Hawaii Five-0. Start fucking using him, Brian Wilson. Instead, what he does is tell us to listen, listen, listen. On the other side, you got the Beatles telling us it's getting better all the time. It was 1966. We needed to hear that it was fucking getting better. Beatles 10-9. Round 5. I'm Waiting for the Day versus Fixing a Hole.
All right. This is so hard all over and over again. Oh, man. Yeah, round 5, Fixing a Hole. I loved the keys. I loved the timpani. I love Carol Kay again. The flutes, all of that stuff, how it comes alive and brings everything together. These are things that are outside of the vocals, and it's great. I'm Waiting for the Day. These it's just, my notes are just frustration and trying to figure out which one is better. And here in round 5, I went 10-9. If Brian Wilson is trying to write the greatest rock album ever, he's off to a great start, and he definitely has an arduous chance at achieving it. And I've got this 10-9 again for them. It's so hard to pick a difference between these two.
Okay, Jesus Christ, people. Finally, some drums. Thank you, Brian Wilson, for giving us a little bit of drums, even some timpani, and then dropping them out. This is like that 5th round when you're watching Floyd Mayweather and he's just been playing defense. And you want him to get the shit going already. And he comes out and he throws 3 big punches and then plays defense again. It's starting to fucking get annoying. You know, they play in the intro, they drop out. I'm pretty sure the song's about a pedophile. Beatles, on the other hand, now here's using a harpsichord to much better effect. And Ringo playing a swing. So experiment, but let us sing along. Shit. Beatles again, 10-9, Fixing a Hole. Mike?
So my first note here is neither song will get votes for being the best on their respective albums.
Okay.
I don't want to use the word filler.
How dare you?
I just said it. Because there's no such thing on these albums.
That's true.
Everything on here is good and deliberate.
All things being relative, however.
But all things being relative, this is where things slow down a bit from just a knocking it out of the park perspective. I really liked the tempo and just the upbeatness. Is that a word? Upbeatness.
It is now.
It is now. Of Waiting for the Day. It's one of the more rocking songs from Pet Sounds, to be honest. It's much more up-tempo and less somber. Fixing a Hole, it's got a swing tempo, like you said. I really dig the song. I always have. It stuck in my head for a long time after listening to these albums head to head, back to back for a while. And I was beating myself up over which one to give 10 and which one to give 9. I'll be honest, because this was one of the really, really close rounds. Beach Boys, 10-9.
Jesus. All right. Round 6. Let's Go Away for a While versus She's Leaving Home. Let's Go Away for a While just proved to me that there was actually a vibraphone in the studio and fucking Brian Wilson refused to use it in round 2. This song seemed to be complicated for no reason at all. In fact, it was a song for no reason at all. And the Beatles made a beautiful vocal arrangement in She's Leaving Home, a beautiful string arrangement. And if you want to have a song where you drop the drums out, this is how you do it. Great depth in the story. You could relate to it from both sides. And for the daughter, it was still optimistic. So I went 10-9, She's Leaving Home. Mike?
So, again, I'm reading from my notes. Instrumentals can be great, but they can also be musical masturbation. There's a fine line. I don't think Let's Go Away for a While really hits the latter, but it gets close. I think it's just instrumentals can be throwaways. It's not horrible. It would be good on any other album, but here there's really no comparison. Really, there's not. If it was up against any other song, it takes a knee.
Yeah.
But She's Leaving Home, and again, I'm a huge Beatles fan.
Yeah.
I love Sgt. Pepper's. It's a well-structured, well-written, well-sung song. But for me, always, this song never quite worked. There was something about it. Again, I can never really place my finger on it. I actually put in my notes, maybe John or Pete will give me something to help me understand why this song never quite worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 10-9. The only reason it's not a 10-8 is because I've just never loved She's Leaving Home enough to really say it just blows away. Let's Go Away for a While, but it's 10-9 Beatles.
Hey, Pete, I actually scored this 10-8, so I'm going to lodge my correction there. But let me ask you a question, Pete, before you get started. What is close to musical masturbation? Is that like a bad hand job from your girlfriend with a glove on? Okay.
A la Animal House?
No, it's when you're in class and you've got some 501s on and you're wiggling your legs back and forth and you realize you've chubbed up a nice fat boner and you realize if I keep going, technically masturbation, but if I chill out and let this grizzly bear in my pants calm down, you're right there. That's that spot.
Thanks for the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you do about round 6?
Round 6 is great. The music from Brian Wilson is beautiful, and anytime again you get the Wrecking Crew in there and you get things going symphonically, you're in a good zone. The problem is I don't get why you have this transition here. It's my shortcoming for sure. It's a beautiful piece of work. Both of these songs are about leaving or going away. Just why not put some words to it? I don't understand the need to do the musical part. I'm sure he could have written something beautiful there, and I know he had a reason for it. I'm not aware of it. When you put up a musical piece, it had better be brilliance, and this song was not brilliance to get by Lennon and McCartney doing what they do. And like you said, Mike, this isn't them crushing it. This is a great song, and I'm positive, because it's the Beatles, there are tens of thousands of people that consider this their favorite song. What the reason why this song doesn't elevate, I think, is sometimes...
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
reach out to us on Twitter
at Pete A. Turner
or at JohnLG69
at the Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now enjoy the show.
Lennon and McCartney get too lost in their day-to-day autobiographical inspirations for songs, and they get a little bit too, I want to say rabbit-holed, but a little bit too laser-focused, and it doesn't resonate with enough people, and I think that's what this song suffers from. Either way, Lennon and McCartney just beat up on a room full of musicians, and when these two bands get together, I mean, George Martin doesn't have a peer. There's nobody that can
Yeah.
outproduce that guy. And when he sits at the keys or when he guides these guys, even not at their best, they are supremely talented. And they can certainly fill the room full of strings. They can certainly fill it full of horns. Push horn players outside of what's technically possible with the horn and still come back with a track that's useful. Yeah. The Beatles can do that. And so here, this for me is it's the take a knee round for the Beach Boys. It's 10-8 Beatles because there's just so much more going on here than a simple instrumental track.
Hey, you want to see Butch Vig get starstruck. You want to see Nile Rodgers get starstruck. You want to see Ted Templeman get starstruck. Bring George Martin in the room. Right? Okay.
George Martin could probably take an album produced by the three of us and make it sound great.
That's not true.
Yeah, come on, take it easy. All right, so round 7 is Sloop John B versus Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. Take it away, Mike.
First note here, who puts a fucking calliope in the middle of a rock and roll song? Genius. Genius.
Oh, genius.
Absolute
Okay, genius. I see.
Yeah, I've loved this song since I think the first time I heard it when I was a little kid. Great vocals, weird experimental lyrics, which I always thought were again really cool when I was a kid. And now I know they were on acid, but at the time I just thought, oh, Henry the Horse dances the waltz. How cool. Kind of freaky. And then in the other corner we have Sloop John B, which was a big hit for the Beach Boys. And is a great song. Mike Love makes another appearance, but in this case he's actually swapping singing duties back and forth with Brian Wilson, which works really well. It really adds to the song, and it makes you understand his whole "don't fuck with the formula" statement that he made when he first started hearing pet sounds from Brian Wilson. So I think Mike Love was kind of against it at first.
I think he was against it all the way through 1988.
Yeah. So yeah, this is definitely a Beach Boys song in the middle of Pet Sounds, but this one works. I don't like it as much as Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, however, so I will give this one to the Beatles. 10-9, Calliope and all.
Calliope and all. Pete.
You know, there's another Mike that didn't like the Wrecking Crew playing his music, and that was Mike Nesbitt. And which one of those guys was smarter? You know, Mike Love learned to get along with what was going on and has had a long, productive touring career. Who cares about, the guy that played something in the Monkees or not? So yeah, there's a trade-off there, and
that guy's done okay for himself.
He has, but he's had a different path, not as big as what Mike Love has done, in my opinion at least. Let's get back to the fight. I've never quite gotten Sloop John B, and let's also cover the fact that this is a cover, but it is the recognized version of the song that everybody thinks of. No one thinks of the Kingston Trio's version or some Islander guy singing it. This is the version, so that's us accounting for the cover, and it's good, but it's not as good as For the Benefit of Mr. Kite. John, you know how much I love a glockenspiel. It makes its appearance. This is George Martin again on display, and this is done with a 4-track recording, and look at all the layers that are going on and how much simultaneous playing had to be done and how much fantastic mastering and mixing had to go into this just to pull off the sounds and the way it's arranged. It's a masterwork. George Martin by himself beats everybody else in the other room. This for me is 10-9 Beatles.
Now, see, this is one of those instances where I wish I would have gone first, because now I have to say what I was going to say. My mind may have been changed. But instead of looking over at the other judges' scorecards and going, those guys are right, I'm just going to stick with my scorecard. And what I said was Sloop John B has a glockenspiel. I'm voting for it. That's it. Pete likes those damn things so much, I can't let that thing go by without voting for it. The song, though, has some fidelity among all of these Beach Boys songs that are on this record. I can't figure out the difference between 65 and 66 and why this record sounds so much less vibrant than Sgt. Pepper, but the one song that sounds okay on it, Sloop John B. I didn't realize it was a cover, so I may have thought differently about it. I dug that Mr. Kite is one of the songs that the Beatles wrote after their obligation to play anything live, and so they could just flex and do whatever they wanted. So from that standpoint, maybe I should have voted for that song. The weird vocals, though, those weird lyrics weirded me out. I always thought that they were kind of creepy. So I voted for Sloop John B. The Beach Boys, the Glockenspiel song. Round 8, God Only Knows versus Within You, Without You.
These rounds seem to be getting harder. Round 8 for me was tough. God only knows. Look at Brian Wilson come running back, after getting it handed to him a couple of rounds in a row, especially with the knockdown. It's like, I was starting to feel like maybe the Beatles had the Beach Boys number, but when genius and genius meet, there's going to be some hurting delivered. And for me, this is one of those songs. Another wonderful time capsule. If you want to capture the mid to late 60s, this is a song you play. That means Carol Kay's on point, and everybody else in this thing is fantastic. I love Carl Wilson singing in this. This is just Pet Sounds being the second best album of all time. Like, this is a song that you can pin that on and go, all right, you got to get over this, because the song is complex. It's got crazy, impossible chord progressions. I'm not skilled enough to break down the theory. I'm just like, how are they getting to these places? It's very tender. So it's not like something like Rush, where you're like, that's incredible playing, but I don't get it. Like, this is a tender song, and Brian Wilson's decision to let his brother sing it because he knew he had the tenderness in him. That's also a masterwork of producing and understanding what's available in your band. I love that. And then Within Without You, this is George Harrison. Look, the Beatles are one of the greatest bands of all time, if not the greatest, partly because they brought all of this Indian stuff. George Harrison finds it, figures it out. This is important for the entire Western world to know. And this is one of those songs where he's introducing this not only to all of us 50 years later, but also to his friends in his greatest of all time band. And they get it and they allow it and he delivers. It's just that when you do that much trailblazing, I think it's a little hard to get it figured out. And there's probably too much going on in this song for my taste. And only because it's going against God Only Knows. I mean, just put it against almost any other song on any other album and it's going to do fine. These are two great songs about religion, but not in the Western sense. Yes, the Beach Boys used the word God, but this is not that God. It's just your God. And we go Eastern style with George's song. And I love those thoughts. And what a progressive thing to do. And the Beach Boys got there first. Wow. What a great song. 10-9 Beach Boys.
Okay, Within You, Without You featured, like you mentioned, some really exotic stuff, and that was Ravi Shankar, and he made a daughter who is just a tiny bit cross-eyed, which I really dig. You know what I'm talking about, right, Pete?
Yep.
Yeah, he knows what I'm talking about. It was Norah Jones. Still, that wasn't enough for Within You, Without You to size up to God Only Knows, which is simplistic, pure songwriting at its heartstring pulling best. I went 10-9 Beach Boys. Mike?
There are a few songs on both albums that I knew just going into this they were going to win the round. Mm-hmm. It was just a matter of whether it was going to be a straight fight or a knockdown.
Yeah.
This was one of those. So let's start with the song that has to take on the barrage, and that is Within You, Without You. The sitar was a huge deal at this time. It was their introduction to Indian music, so I am not going to penalize them for excessive sitar use. If this album was released a couple of years later, yeah,
right.
Put it down. It's a less impressive entry from the man who would bring us something, and Here Comes the Sun, and While My Guitar Gently Weeps. I think the song is really, really good. It's a little bit repetitive, and by contrast, God Only Knows is maybe one of the best love songs ever written in the history of ever. It really, that's a song that's always touched me when I hear the lyrics. I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. God only knows what I'd be without you. Come on.
Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Carl Wilson makes a rare lead vocalist appearance here, with the rest of the boys singing beautiful backing vocals. Just makes the song so much sweeter. He doesn't make many appearances, but this is one where who else could have done it? Nobody. If you dedicate this song to your loved one, or if you have the chops to sing it, you sing it to him, her, they'll melt for sure. This is a song that people just have an emotional reaction to. I'm saying that the Beatles take a knee here, and I'm going 10-8 Beach Boys.
Wow.
Damn.
That's bold. Good job, Mike.
Okay, round 9. I know there's an answer versus When I'm 64. Here comes that calliope. What was with the fucking calliope between these two songs? But I have to give Brian Wilson some credit for dropping it first. It's terrific. Carol Kay's bass line. This is another one of those occasions where she just really nails it. It's wonderfully strong. When I'm 64 holds a special place in my heart because it's a song that Pete and I have performed live with his daughter Brenna, and it was a hell of a rendition, and we were paid handsomely for the performance that we gave. So I scored it a draw, a rare draw.
Yeah, that is rare.
Yeah,
you hardly ever see those. That's good. I mean, that's tough. Good job,
Pete.
Technically, I scored it a draw. And by technically, I mean officially, of course. We try not to do draws. We try to discern a benefit between these two, but I can't do it. I can't find fault with either one of these songs. On occasion, Paul gets a little too jingly and cartoony for me. This is right up next to that, but I don't have a quibble with this song. Maybe it doesn't fit perfectly into the album format, but it's so clever. It's so catchy. There's nothing wrong with that. And I know there's an answer. Again, like you said, Carol Kay, goodness gracious, just what she does. And I'm not talking about all of the other fantastic contributions throughout the album from the Wrecking Crew. She's kind of placeholding for all of the Wrecking Crew, whether they're playing, in this case, the bass harmonica. Again, like, hey, go grab the thing furthest from here that makes a bass. That thing, yeah, sure, play that.
What the hell is this?
Yeah. Exactly. A keyed trombone, perfect. Whatever it's going to be. They both these albums use so many different instruments, many different kinds of keyboards. Harpsichord, okay, all of them. Pump organ, okay, that's played too. So,
pretty sure that's a radiator from a 31 Packard. I don't know, blow in it.
It's like the Fat Albert gang. Yeah, they're just making stuff up. A bass trombone is actually played in this song. Why would you need to do that? John, can you name another song that's got bass trombone in it?
Yeah, you know what? If I had enough time to study and do some research, I could probably come up with one in a half an hour.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is that in both cases, both of these songs are wonderful, and they can grab any instrument, and the talent that's in the room not only can play it, but the guys behind the glass can make it work. So 10-10.
Mike?
So rounds 9 through 12 all have the asterisk, which means I have trouble deciding all the rest of these rounds. I actually did make a decision on round 9. Both really outstanding songs in their own right. Another personal bias that I tried to resist is I just love singing When I'm 64.
It's fun.
It's a karaoke staple.
Yeah.
You guys know I like singing. So I really tried to dissect both the songs and not vote based on my personal likes. I know that an answer is musically brilliant. I think when I listened, I caught some weird jumping editing going on in there, and so I did a little digging, and the song was originally entitled Check Your Ego, and they had to edit it and change it because Brian Wilson didn't really like the idea of Check Your Ego, wanted to change it to something a little bit more outreaching than accusatory. You can actually find the original Check Your Ego in some of the outtakes for Pet Sounds.
I think it was on the Pet Sounds sessions.
Yeah. So that was the original version of it. It does sound a little edited versus When I'm 64 sounding very much like a complete, really when it came down to it, when I really dissected the songs, When I'm 64 just sounded like a slightly more complete song. And that's what gave it the edge. And this was a hard decision, but I went 10-9 Beatles.
On completeness.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have the courage of a lion, Mike. Way to go.
Round 10, Here Today versus Lovely Rita. Take it away, Pete.
Well, this is Paul being Paul. he gets a parking ticket and turns it into a world-class song. And this is like what I said, sometimes they get a little too specific in the Lennon-McCartney writing thing. This is a time where, it works. This is a great song, and it's catchy. It's right up to that edge of jingly. You could take this thing and you could sell soap from this song, and people would go crazy buying it. I love Rita. I love who she is, and thank you, Paul, for being maybe the most important musician of the last 100 years, because this is such a fantastic song, and this is not even anywhere near I wouldn't even say it's in his top 10. So it's a great song. John Lennon plays to the tissue and the comb in this song. Are you fucking kidding me? Come on. I know maybe they did do this on purpose since there's some distance between the two albums, but when they hear all the different things that are grabbed, and you've got to have a PhD level ear to pick out what these different things are. It's a great song. Here Today is fine. It's just not quite as good as Lovely Rita, and I'm going to go 10-9.
Wow. Mike?
Who doesn't love a sexy meter, mate? Lovely Rita is one of those hidden gems that I think, again, as Pete said before, this is a seminal album, so I'm sure there's dozens of people out there for whom Lovely Rita is their very favorite Beatles song. But I think it does get overshadowed by everything else on this album. And I think that it's an excellent song. It's really well hidden, and one of my favorites also. Here Today, this one is just really feels more like a Beach Boys song with extra instruments thrown in. It doesn't really do anything for me. It's not outstanding. It's a great song on a much greater album, and for that reason, I leaned towards the Beatles again here and went 10-9 Beatles. I don't have a ton to say about either song really. I think the Beatles edge it out, just better song overall.
Here Today for me was a song that showed a guy who was willing to say, you guys have to go on the road and play this shit. I don't care. And so there was a bunch of experimentation in there that I thought was really just to spite the rest of the band. And for that, I gave it the win. Besides that, to quote our friend Angelo Moore from episode, 18? Fuck the meter maids, man. Fuck them. That's just how I feel. I gave the Beach Boys Here Today. Round 11, I just wasn't made for these times versus Good Morning, Good Morning.
I've got the Beach Boys starting to look like they're in a little bit of trouble, and I'm wondering if they can even hurt the Beatles at this point enough to get caught up and even. And, there's 2 songs left, and one's an instrumental and the other one's a reprise. So it's going to really come down to these next couple of rounds for me. I think Good Morning is one of the weaker. Well, I think it's the weakest track on this album. I think it's too repetitive. It's a little annoying. If they were trying to be like an alarm clock, then maybe that is it. Like any good Beatles song, it's also been used in commercials, and for a reason, because it definitely sticks with you. And even though I think I like it the least of the 26 songs, it is the one that continues to stay in my head after listening to both albums. I mean, other things filter through, but that one seems to just pop up, pop up, pop up. It's like a cork in a bathtub. It just keeps coming up for me. I Wasn't Made for These Times, I think, is influential in a lot of ways. He's introspective in a way that just wasn't common back then for rock songs. He's putting himself out and his struggles, and again, he's cracking up right here. This is mid-crack up. He's already broken down once. He's not sure what to do. He's got this massive work that he's going to get through, and then what does he do after this? This is it. And I think the importance of this song and allowing that voice to come out and creating that space for those who followed him all the way through to the 90s with all the shoegazer, Woe Was Me, My Mom Is Divorced kind of rock stuff that we saw. This all goes back to Brian struggling and putting it out and saying, this is not a perfect life. I'm not just a Beach Boy. I'm this guy that struggles to get out of bed to not want to hurt myself and everything else. So powerful song for me, wins out over Good Morning, which is annoying. And I Wasn't Made for the Times wins 10-9.
Oh boy. You know what? You're absolutely right about all those things. But again, I can't change my scorecard. I went Good Morning because it's classic Beatles optimism in the mid-'60s. At a time we really needed it. I'm a morning person. I get up if I get up and it's 4 a.m., it's no surprise. I usually get up just before 4. I want to see the sun come up. And this, for me, I get that it's repetitive, but it's rock and roll. It keeps you upbeat. By this point in Pet Sounds, I was worn out. And I can't say enough that Brian Wilson's ability to be expressive about his struggle was not only inspirational, it was important. But man, I'd had enough by now, so I went good morning, 10-9. How about you, Mike?
Kind of feel like I'm on point counterpoint. Maybe I should say, John, you ignorant slut. I disagree.
You get a Wilson. May not be right, but you get a.
Wilson was seriously on the verge of major breakdown. Nobody saw it, but everybody should have seen it. This song is really one of the biggest signs. This led to the Smile sessions after, which it took that album, 40 years to get made?
Yeah.
He was starting to get real introspective, maybe too introspective. But this song is just it's so tender, but the longing in his voice is just palpable. And then, go beyond the voice, which, as a singer, I'd like to focus in on the vocalist, but I tried to look at the music also. Just overall, there's a ton of creativity in the overall composition. They didn't leave a whole lot of instruments on the table, and they used a theremin before the Star Trek theme.
Yeah, and before Angelo Moore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a really, really cool song. Good Morning. I really do like that song. I love the optimism. I love the beat. I love the positive vibe. It really is an earworm. I didn't find myself pissed off that it was stuck in my head like Pete was, but it was one of the songs that I found myself humming at work. Good Morning, what really does put up a battle. I think when I listened to it again, trying to dissect the songs, there are a couple of jarring edits you have to listen for in Good Morning that I heard. And that was that just kind of pushed me back towards the Beach Boys. I went Beach Boys 10-9. Just wasn't made for these times, just slightly better.
Okay. Round 12 was Pet Sounds versus Sgt. Pepper's Reprise. Yeah, I've had enough of the instrumentals. This is a great album. It's a groundbreaking album, but really the years have been less kind to Pet Sounds, and they've been less kind to the instrumentals on Pet Sounds. You know what I like better than Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band? The fucking Reprise. It's funkier, it's greasier, it hits harder. It's not the intro song. The intro song did exactly what it was supposed to. This is bringing it back, and it's bringing it back strong. I like the Reprise better. 10-9, the Beatles.
For the penultimate tracks, I think that Pet Sounds would have been better served by having 11 tracks instead of 13. The two instrumentals are fine. I think this is a wonderful instrumental. It's like the other one is, but I don't understand the need for it here. It is stupidly coincidental that it's the two title tracks, Sgt. Pepper's and Pet Sounds, here in this late round. But maybe there's some kind of stylistic thing that I'm just not aware of from that era. But it's, I like that Tommy Tedesco's on it. I like that the Wrecking Crew is creating this thing, and he had a chance to do this. But I wish they would have pocket vetoed this song and just sat on it, because it doesn't do enough. I'm okay with one interlude, but there's just no point in this. And I'm disappointed that this song is there, because I really want it to be... I like the risk that he takes. I don't think he landed it. That's what I want to say. And then on the Sgt. Pepper's Reprise, the thing I realized with Sgt. Pepper's is that there are two versions of that song on this album, and they aren't even the best versions of this song. So it's okay. If it's going to be between these two songs, it's going to be a difference maker, I think, in this fight. But I'm going to give it Beatles 10-9.
Wow, the difference maker even. Last round.
What about me?
Oh, shit. You didn't do round 12. Round 12, Mike.
Me?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of wishing you had skipped me when I'm looking back at my score, because you guys made some really good points, but I'm not changing my score. I'm not changing my score. I want to change my score. I'm not changing my score. The fighters are getting really tired, and I think we are too. As my earlier phrase probably points out. But I thought these were both really good examples of doing it right if you're going to do it at all. Sgt. Pepper's Reprise, Ringo hits it hard coming out of the gate. Paul still has the chops to get the vocals going. Again, that he does that screaming singing that is really incredibly hard to do without destroying your voice, sounding in tune, but at the same time having that rough edge. It's incredibly hard to do, trust me. It's, a lot of people have ruined their voices trying. Meantime, Pet Sounds has this great samba beat going, maybe? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
John?
I really didn't. I think of this as, if this is a samba, it's a cut rate samba.
So I had Pet Sounds edging out the Reprise. I'm really thinking that I scored this one wrong. I really want to reverse.
You hate going last.
I really want to reverse, but I'm not gonna. I'm gonna stick with my original midnight scoring of this.
Way to stick to your guns, Mike. I hate going last.
Going last sucks, but yeah.
All right. Well, round 13 is Caroline No versus A Day in the Life, and I won't make you go last again. Mike Lipari.
A Day in the Life is not just one of the best Beatles songs. It's not just the best song on this album. It's one of the best songs ever produced, in my humble opinion. They got everything right about this song. The Beach Boys are going to really have to bring it with Caroline No, and they don't. I don't think that they bring enough from this song. It's a great song. It's a tender song. Great lyrics about longing, loss, that weird train sounder thrown at the end of the song, which I'm sure was innovative back in the 60s. I'm sure a lot of people like Caroline No. It just didn't do it for me. At the same time, you start listening to A Day in the Life. Oof. It's just, you start out with haunting vocals, a sparse guitar. I read the news today. It just starts there and builds and builds and builds and builds to this crescendo. And you think you're at the climax of the song, and then we get Paul jumping in with this little interlude. Woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. And then you go through his little interlude. Somebody spoke and I went into a dream. And then it goes right back into that dreamy, swirly vocal. Then John gets a soft approach to the final verse, but then that orchestral backing builds and builds and builds until you get to that huge crescendo and then that final piano chord fading out. It's just perfection in the song. I can't do anything but give a knockdown to the Beatles. Beach Boys are taking a knee. It's 10-8.
Wow. Knockdown even.
Wow.
Pete?
That's bold, Mike, and I love it. I love audacity, so that's fantastic. Caroline No to me is a wonderful song, but it's also a song they sort of already sung on this album, the tender love ballad, and I just need something a little bit more from them. This song is great, and you can play this song every time you go out on stage, and people are going to love it and sing with it. And it is wonderful. And only in our stupid formula where we smash these things together does this song come up wanting. Because otherwise, tell me John Bon Jovi wouldn't want to have 20 of these songs. I mean, this is an incredible, incredible song. But it is not A Day in the Life. And they both have this really weird ending, like Mikey talked about, like the final chord and everything, and then the train sounds and the pet sounds. The thing I love about both of the endings, and I definitely give credit here, is anytime in these old-time albums where you're like, if you listen real close, you'll hear George Martin ruffling papers and sitting back in his chair. You're like, I love those things that they have these moments in there. A Day in the Life is just when you are probably, and I'll say definitely my favorite songwriting duo ever. If you're probably the greatest songwriting duo ever, you do songs like this where both of you come in, you've both contributed, you both sing, you take the song in different directions. And I don't know anybody else that does this like as often and as well as these guys do. This is a fantastic way to close out an album. And only the strength of Caroline No for me keeps this from being a knockdown round. I have it Beatles 10-9 to close out the fight.
Yeah, I did too. You guys have said it all. Day in the Life's a great song. It's a great journey. Caroline Knows, good song too. It's just a good song against Day in the Life. 10-9 Beatles. So I think what we have here is a unanimous decision, and that's pretty amazing.
So I've got Beatles 123, Beach Boys 121.
123 to 121. Wow. Yeah. Pete, you had it 124, 122. I had it 126, 121. It was a little more of a walk away for me. But I think the summation of this thing is that the Pet Sounds album was absolutely terrific. It was groundbreaking. Once that ground was broken, the Beatles said, oh, I know what we can do with this. And they took it a little further, and they took it a little deeper, and they gave us a product that has longer legs. And so that's really what it comes down to. What a great fight, though, fellas. Great time.
I just want to say a couple things. One of them is I always use Everpedia to research my stuff because I love what those guys do and I want to support them. So when you are out there looking, try out Everpedia and see, because they're going to have more of the people represented in articles, and I think it's pretty cool. The other thing is I have known Mike since the 70s. He's been my friend, one of my dearest and closest friends throughout my life, and one of my true joys as an adult, as a middle-aged man, is being able to sit down with my friends and have these conversations and capture them for posterity. So I love you, Mike. I love what we are, our friendship, how many decades back it goes, and how many funny stories we have. And now we have this one to add to the pile, and it really means a lot to me. And if we get to tell it over the backdrop of the incredible Beach Boys and the wonderful Beatles, then I'll take that every day. And just thank you for picking this fight, as hard as it was. I really enjoyed being able to do this with you, brother. I love it. And of course, as always, John, we get to do this all the time, but so it's really special with Mike that we got a chance to do this with you.
Yeah, you don't have to sit next to him. He's touching my knee. I can't. I've been getting. He's a little. He's a little Harvey Weinstein-ish.
It's a pretty knee.
He's not really.
It's a pretty knee. You should shave more, though.
Well,
yeah, Pete. I thank you for inviting me. This has been more fun than I thought it was going to be, and I've been looking forward to this for about a week. Yeah, Pete. I feel the same way about you, brother. It's and I mean brother. I mean brother in every way.
In the most incestuous way.
Yeah, of course.
Our special guest has been Mike Lipari. He picked a hell of a fight. This was a great battle. I wonder if we did this like a year from now and just went at it with fresh ears, if the score would come out. I'm not suggesting we do that. We got plenty of other records to do. But
it would be a curiosity.
I don't want to draw it out, but if Brian Wilson had held it together and had more tracks with him, because we know what the Beatles are about to give us.
Mm-hmm.
Like they managed to somehow hit a new gear. Would this have changed this album? Like certain albums make the albums subsequent to that better. Like U2 did that when they came out with Octoon Baby. You're like, wait, all these other albums just got better. We didn't realize these guys were this good. Beach Boys didn't get that benefit, but the Beatles certainly did.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's true.
I was saying to John when we sat down before we got you on the line, Pete, was we just talked about the seminal 60s albums. And I think we owe it to ourselves as children of the 80s to identify the seminal 80s albums and do the same thing in a month or so.
Interesting. What do you say is on that list?
I would say Joshua Tree is definitely on that list.
Joshua Tree.
I know you guys already did Actung Baby, but Joshua Tree is one of those seminal 80s albums that just about everybody owned.
Sure. George Michael, Faith.
Yeah, Thriller is in there.
Thriller's
definitely
in there. For sure.
Probably Madonna.
Yeah.
But the list gets really short after that.
No kidding. A Bon Jovi, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Or Slippery When Wet. Slippery When Wet.
Slippery When Wet probably more than New Jersey. But we should find out what the listeners think.
License to Ill.
License to Ill.
Oh, yeah.
Holy shit.
Jeez.
And Appetite for Destruction. I mean, and after that, I don't know if anybody else can get into that list.
Yeah.
That's a heavy list.
Yeah. Well, I bet the listeners will have something to say about it. And I would certainly love to come back again and take on the 80s.
Okay. You know what? In the spirit of our friend Scott Burford, maybe we should make an 80s bracket and whittle it down in the bracket. And then after we work out the bracket, then we'll do the top two.
I'm in.
Cool. All right. Fellas, thank you very much. Everybody, thanks for listening.